Welcome to the latest coverage of Mud, Dust and Gears, the Northern Region Off-Road Racing Championship, brought to you by Bachat, Dorps Civils, Calcimite and Zalco Motors. Lichtenburg 4x4 would be our base camp for the rest of the racing weekend, with all the drivers having to go out there and complete a 36-kilometer prologue. That would be the first order of the event, and straight after that, they'd get themselves ready to go out and attack 2 racing laps of 125 kilometers each that make up the Lichtenburg 250. Thanks once again to Lichtenburg 4x4 for hosting the event, and we get ourselves ready to send 16 of our top regional competitors out into this amazing terrain. Still in the early part of winter, which means it was going to be a little bit drier than everyone was hoping for, meaning that dust was going to be the order of the day. The first thing we saw, though, was the pits start to fill up with all of our top regional competitors covering each of the categories, all starting to now think about championship glory come the end of the 2018 season. With 16 cars making the trip, a lot of development between rounds 2 and 3 meant we would see different vehicles and possibly new winners in the categories come the end of this round 3 of racing. The X1 rolling in, and everyone had a cold shiver as that car rolled through. The white Toyota Hilux of Yanni Visser would be a big threat coming into this round. He knows this area extremely well, and he knows the car well, and everyone would be chasing him down. We saw big entries coming in, though. The X777 of Stein Visser. This was going to be an ex-factory Ford running in the diesel configuration of vehicles, so fun to see how the diesels would be coping in this cold weather. We know they don't like the cold starts, but maybe later on in the day, the diesels would just keep on trucking. For the navigators, it was all down to business, making sure the notebook was marked and checked, and everyone had their A game on. Hud Speed and Huddy were in close attendance. It was going to be Rodney Cook behind the wheel this time around, trying to chase down some points in his goal to be regional champion. The D16 rolling through the pits, exciting times to see the boys, Regan Austin and everyone coming into play from Kaya Sands Midas. But right now, it was the formality of putting some of the event sponsors on the cars, going through documentation and scrutineering, and getting ready to go out and attack. Keith Toy had made the trip across the border as well, and he was going to come racing in his incredible racing bat, and would no doubt be one of the big threats to go after a win in the special vehicles. Stepping off Dakar and off motorcycles, it was fun to see some new blood coming into play, and we'd be keeping a close eye on Willem de Toy in the P17 CRT to see how he handled the big jump across from handlebars to steering wheel. Bit of a point and shoot car, so a nice development. We've seen Brian Baragwarnath step across from quads onto a CRT, and he found the move relatively easy. We'll probably see a similar situation from de Toy. With the marshals and the medics arriving on site, it was getting close to the bone to get ready. Coming into this round of the championship, though, in the driver's side, in the Class Ds, Francois van der Walt was in the lead, and Andre Geldenhuys was leading in the Class Es alongside Victor Fincham. We'd be watching the E6 vehicle throughout the event. Overall drivers in the production vehicles, it was Francois van der Walt leading out ahead of Lawrence van Veek and Jacco Wiese. And in the navigation championship, Gerry Prinsloo, no surprise to see him leading ahead of Suisse Moret and Johan Wiese. On the special vehicle side of things, Class P, the Gaveyas have a stranglehold on the championship ahead of the Leroux. The Drivers' Championship has Tony Gaveya ahead of Tinus Leroux and Willem de Toy. And on the navigation side of things, it's Mikey Gaveya ahead of Tian Leroux and Bertus Gossart. In the Class X Championship, Yanni Visser, a big threat with Chris Visser Jr. on the notes, leading ahead of Alcy de Joche, who was a no-show at this event. In the Class Z, no one turning up at this round, meaning TJ Hodgman and JP Strauss lead going into round number 4. Join us after the break as we pick up on all the action from the prologue.
The first of our 2 learners is ambitious 18-year-old shop assistant Rachel and her dad Alex, a pastor.
We argue, but I would call it a heated discussion. Okay.
Next up, 21-year-old fashion assistant Joshua and his Portuguese mum Maria, a homeopathic therapist.
Am I going to pass?
Yeah.
Should I say it in Portuguese?
Yeah.
Sim.
See.
Sim.
Mom makes cooking look super easy, but you need to be careful in the kitchen. Don't fiddle with any knobs because you could burn yourself. Let Mom help you with any cooking or baking you want to do. And if you smell something burning, rather let the grown-ups check the oven. Keep these tips in mind and one day you'll also be a master chef like Mom. DSTV, helping you to be aware and care.
I'm Ryan Friedlinghaus, CEO of the world-famous West Coast Customs. What started as a $5,000 loan from my grandfather became this. The most creative and innovative custom car shop on the planet. This is my world, and this is how it's done.
Yeah, tattoos and tailpipes and bad in the bone. We're the West Coast wizards of leather and chrome.
Welcome back to Mud, Dust and Gears. Before the break, we introduced the setup and got ourselves ready for the third round of the Northern Regions Off-Road Championship, or the Cross Country Championship, here at the Lichtenburg 4x4 Club. Now it's time to get serious, with everyone going out there to chase the cheese and try and get the best time on the prologue. 36 kilometer coming into play, and this would be desperate times. With the early winter coming into play in the area around Lichtenburg, it meant that dust was going to be a key factor, meaning that it was all important to try and get the best time and try and start ahead of your rivals. 36 kilometer prologue with a predicted race time of around about 30 minutes, meaning that the average speed on the short prologue was going to be around about 80 to 85 kilometers an hour, with a slightly longer version of the race loop, which would be 2 laps of 125 Ks, with a predicted race time on each loop of just over an hour. So it was going to be a fast day. That was pretty much what the guys were getting told at driver's briefing. The story was going to be very key to make sure that all of the stringent rules were adhered to. The day was going to be busy for the navigators as well as the drivers. And Lichtenburg is famous for having a couple of lurkers and square edge rocks, so people were desperate to not have to get out of their cars in the cold and dusty conditions to have to do the running repairs. Everyone made the relevant notes, high fives and smiles and nerves as trophies were handed out from the previous round before the drivers and navigators and the pit crews got themselves ready for the day at hand. It was nice to see our crossovers coming into play from other sports, and we welcomed new competitors and old competitors alike with open arms. The COC for the day was all smiles, but remember, he is the keeper of the rules and the rule book, and that smile can quickly turn to a frown if anything goes wrong on the day, and penalties can, will, and have been in the past handed out. Even though he was championship points leader, it would be up to Yanni Visser to take second wheel this time around, as our invitational category would be opening up the track. Keith McInerney and Antote Bareng in the bat spec 2. Great to have them as part of our championship, and they would no doubt be dropping the hammer hard. This kind of open terrain and a very fast loop would definitely be playing into the hands of the special vehicles. Huge fire-breathing engines and unlimited suspension travel. Yanni Visser and Chris Visser running in the X category. This is the Cross Challenge, new for 2018. And for all of the older Class S, Class T and Class A cars, they'd be going racing hard against each other. Francois van der Walt and Gerry Prinsloo in a strong position in the championship, and the car is near on faultless, as on the season already it has taken back-to-back victories. Lawrence van Veek and Suisse Moret slightly missing their call on the countdown, and on a sprint prologue like this, those are valuable seconds lost. The D1 and leaders in the D category would have to really pull up their socks. Jacco and Johan Wieser, the D15 powerhouse of a Hilux. The half cab, as we used to be able to call them, going out and doing the chase down. Andre Gildenes and Victor Fincham in the Toyota Hilux E6. They'd be looking for victory in their Class E vehicle, and also coming off a very good early part of the 2018 season with a solid off-season, a full rebuild on the vehicle, and it's starting to bear fruit as the pairing have really become buddies in the cab and understand what it takes to get the win done. Rodney Cook and Jaco Schiller, great to see these guys in the mix together. Remember, Jaco Schiller is the son of the Dakar navigator Gerard Schiller, and Rodney Cook, for a long time, he was riding side saddle alongside his good buddy, and that is Huddy. Regan Austin and Warren Foss, the guys running out of the Kaya Sands Midas colours, and they have been stalwarts of the regional championship race series for so many years. Ignace Duplessis and Jean Vermark. Great to see Isuzu still running the numbers out there, and the KB 300 will be in full flight attack mode, trying to get the job done. Thierry Titoy and Arnold Norkia. So often you'll see the single cab buckies running in these series with Diedrich and Rikus Hutting. They're in a good situation as far as the championship goes, and you can see through the cab there, all smiles, especially for Hutting. He glanced across as his co-driver. Love to know what those final words of encouragement were. Tony and Mikey Gouveia, what a story. They are really starting to become a powerhouse squad. They've got an impeccable setup on the CRT, and I'm putting some money on the fact that at the end of next season they're going to make the bold move up to step up into some more powerful machinery. Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard. Remember, Willem coming off an incredible ride at this year's Dakar, and now makes the move into the cab. A little bit more safety features, but every time we see a motorbike racer or a quad racer make the move across into cross-country racing on the car side of things, they climb right to the top, and quickly as well. This kind of terrain, with it being quite wide open and flowing, should suit the driving style and the driving economy of the CRT. Good shots to see some on board there. Stijn Fibia and Peter van der Merwe, the Ford Ranger, running the turbo diesel vehicle. It's a different sound when it launches. The X777 will be an exciting car to watch out. This was a gamble that the factory Fords took a couple of years ago to see if they could make the diesels run the numbers against the petrol turbo versions. Keith and Victor de Tooy, so father and son pairing, making the trip across the border from Botswana in the White Star Bat, the big V8 vehicle, running in the X category, and he would be a big threat as well. He knows this terrain well.
Bachat!
And thanks to Bachat for coming on as one of our major sponsors for this event and for the series. I was talking at the beginning of the show about how many rocks there were around. Thankfully, we're not going into that quarry, but where there's a quarry, there's going to be rocks kicking around all over the place. Keith McNetty and Intote Bareng would be the first vehicle out, and on a short run like this, remember the 36-kilometer prologue is desperate racing. You've got to find every single crumb, and when it came to the end of play, the fastest and the slowest drivers were only separated by just over 10 minutes, showing how tight it really was, and mistakes were going to be punished. Van der Walt and Prinsloo would want to have a really good run in the prologue to put themselves in a solid position to go and attack when it went out into the racing loops. Van Veek and Moret in the Toyota Hilux just dropping to the left-hand side of the quarry pit. When we got a breakdown of the track, it did sound like the first 52 Ks of racing was going to be relatively easy. Nothing too gnarly, nothing too technical, but out on the big loops, it was going to be a little bit more of a handful. On board then with Geldenace and Fincham in their Toyota Hilux, staying with a lot of the Tweespoor roads, so navigation not too tricky this time around. A couple of markers to help out, but essentially it is all down to the navigator and the communication between navigator and driver to find those valuable numbers. Rodney Cook and Jaco Schiller have been pairing up since the early part of 2018, and they would go on to record a nice tasty run just outside of the top 10 overall. Regan Austin and Warren Foss in the Kaya Sands Midas colors, their Hilux. You can always recognize these guys with that orange tint on their windscreen, and it's not just a style feature. This does help highlight the shadows. I know this from a little bit of motocross. It's a very special color that highlights the shadows, and it means that they don't have to do all of the work inside the cab. They've got a little bit of an advantage over the rest, but it is an expensive piece of kit to put in your car. Duplessis and Vermark in the one and only Isuzu KB 300. There are a couple of single cabs racing in other categories, but here on the Northern Regions, great to have them with us. Tiens de Toy and Arnold Norkia in their Hilux. They'll be chasing down a nice ride in the E1 category. Eventually they'd go on to score a 15th place, so erring very much on the side of caution in the propeller center vehicle. Diedrich and Rickers Hutting, they're in a good position as far as their championship goes in the D67. They would climb high as well, inside of a top 10 for qualifying 7th place come the end of play. Tony and Mikey Gouveia in the CRT, they remember came into this round as Class P points and championship race leaders. Third place here in the prologue qualifier would set them up nicely for the event in the P51. Willem de Toy and Bertus Gossard, while this was an incredible story that we'd be watching throughout the rest of the event, they attacked hard and went fastest overall. The X777 and the turbo diesel version of the Ford Ranger, Stijn Vivier and Peter van der Merwe, even though they had a couple of stall-outs, they still recorded the 7th fastest time in the prologue. The diesel engine just really battling in the early morning cold. And that was unfortunately one of the reasons that the factory squad went back to petrol and turbos. Keith and Victor de Toy in the Bat Spec 3 in the White Star colors. They had a nice drive as well, placing themselves inside of the top 5 overall. Tight sections around the quarry, not really suiting the wide open driving styles of de Toy and the special vehicle. But come the end of play, it was going to be fun to see how the rest of the day was going to be lining up. Francois van der Walt and Gerry Prinsloo had some major braking issues, which unfortunately came into play at the finish line. So a rough start to our championship points leaders overall. And they wouldn't have much time between the end of the prologue and the beginning of racing to try and resolve those issues. And that unfortunately is why we see them sitting a little bit further down the order than they should be. They'd be sweating it because climbing the ladder in this rough terrain and tight track, it's going to be very hard to make the big passes count. On board with a couple of guys that have given us footage, and it's very gratefully accepted, Andre Gelderneys and Victor Fincham giving us a upfront and onboard view of what it's like to go cross-country racing. They recorded single digits, squeaking their way inside of a top 10, 9th place come the end of the prologue, and the E6, no issues, no problems, just a quick refuel and get themselves ready. Ronnie Cook and Jaco Skidder always going to be attacking early on in the race, just slipping outside of a top 10 overall, so double digits for Cook and Skidder. The E18, 10th for Ignace Duplessis and Jean Vermaak in the Isuzu. Diedrich Hutting and Rickers Hutting coming charging in there, trying to take the flying finish with some gusto. The P67, 6th place, coming the end of 36 kilometer, which a lot of the drivers and crews, as well as the pit crews, were using as a glorified setup and shakedown. P51 of the Gouveas, nice for them. 3rd place come the end of the qualifying, and if this is anything to go by, then the CRTs are in good shape. And Willem de Toy giving our flag lady a little bit of a jump there as they came sliding in. But de Toy is going to be the man to beat come the end of this play. De Toy and Norkia, as well as Austin and Voss, catching each other up and possibly slowing each other down. With Austin right at the back of the pack, unfortunately it was overheating problems on the Kaya Sands Midas Toyota, which would see them start right at the back of the pack and try and figure things out as the day went on. The X777 and the incredible sound of that massive turbo on the diesel. 5th place come the end of the qualifying prologue run. Keith and Victor de Toy in the Bat Spec 3 running in the X category. They had a nice run, 4th place drive for them. And that means in the early stages of the opening race lap, they'd at least be not taking too much of the dust into play. Here's confirmation then of the running in Class D for the time trial. Diedrich and Rickers Hutting top the charts ahead of Jaco and Johan Vierse, with Lawrence van Veek and Sways Moret down in 3rd place. In the production Class E's, it was Andre Gelderneys and Victor Fincham who did an incredible job to top the charts ahead of Duplessis and Vermaak, with Rodney Cook and Jaco Skidder in with a shout in 4th place. Of course, on the championship, we also cover the production class overall. And coming out the time trial, it was Diedrich and Vickers Hutting at the top, with Jaco and Johan Vierse, all the D's at the top of the charts. First of the E's was Kildenace and Fincham in 4th. In the special Class P's, Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard, what a story. Ahead of Tony and Mike Gavea, the CRTs are coming, and the Class P Championship is going to be a nail-biter. In the Class X, Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr., no surprise to see the X1 top in the charts, ahead of Keith and Victor de Tooy. So it's production vehicle versus specials versus diesel, which is Viviers and Van der Merwe. And our one and only international entrant coming out of the prologue time trial, Keith McNatty and Tote Bareng. Thanks for opening up the track, guys. In all the vehicles, it was Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard who went faster than anyone else out there to beat out Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr., with Tony and Mikey in 3rd place ahead of Keith and Victor de Tooy. But that was just the 36-kilometer prologue done, so we headed into the pits to pick up on the stories.
Hi, it's Gary Prinsley here at the Caddy Civils Racing Team. We're at Lichtenburg, 250. We just had the time trials now where 26 kilometers in, we broke the left brake caliper. So we just had to have a slow pace to the finish, but we just managed to fix that. And I believe we're carrying on.
To say thank you very much to our main sponsor Bokhat and to Makulu, Cesar Bantu, ProCare for all the financial assistance. Without that it won't be possible. We will do our best with 3 calipers and see if we can slow down the bakkie on the brakes.
We had a nice time trial. We didn't have any problems, which helped us a lot. So hopefully we can keep the pace and finish the main race on the same pace. And thank you very much to our main sponsor Deep Civils, as well as RK Motion for all the help and stuff, and TNT Diesel for all our fuel. And we hope to see you guys in the future again.
Hi, we Team Gavea. We just finished time trials, and it was a short 36 kilometers, but quite intense because we want to get up front so we're out of the dust. We managed 3rd. We're quite happy with that. We had an oil leak which we just repaired now, so we're ready for a couple of minutes to pull off for main race.
Time trial went very well. Quite rough out there. No problems with the car. So we're looking forward to the main race, see what happens there.
So that's it. The prologue time trial is done and the scene is set for us to go racing. We hope you guys will join us after the break as it gets a little bit more wild. A very short 36-kilometer prologue. Now, each lap is over 100 kilometers of arduous cross-country racing for the buckies and the buggies to try and figure out how to survive the day, come home clean, and get more points on the plate for this all-important championship.
These all-wheel drive vehicles have already proven their success. Now they want to build on that reputation. The BMW X1, now completely new. Skoda sends the popular Yeti onto the market in 2 versions. And this has become an integral part of our lives. The Audi A6 All-Road Quattro, all-time favorites, now in 4x4, the all-wheel drive magazine.
My name is Antonio Sabato Jr.
Wow.
Renovating is what I do, but helping people is what I love.
Do it again. Ah!
I've been designing and remodeling spaces for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
From landscapes to living rooms, from bedrooms to porches, we all have that one space that needs a little help.
You got 30 minutes, guys. Let's go. Let's move.
With my experienced team of local professionals, every day we're transforming lives across the country, one project at a time.
Wow. Wow.
This is Fix It and Finish It.
You're under arrest for avoiding an RBT site.
You look drunk, sound drunk, smell drunk.
It's extremely concerning. We've got 2 young kids in the car. She's running the gauntlet and taking a massive risk.
I would suggest he's had quite a lot 3 or 4 hours ago. You need your licence to work, man.
Absolutely screwed without it.
If I don't change, my son's gone, I'll be dead.
Welcome back to Mud, Dust and Gears, where we pick up on now going into racing action for round 3 of the Northern Region Cross Country Championship Racing Series for 2018. The prologue is done, the order is drawn, and now we get the cars into the queue to go racing. But before we do that, welcome Bakrat for one of our new sponsors coming into the tour. And they're a bunch of characters, believe you me.
Burkie, there's only one deer, a John Deere. I know, Shouty. But remember, there's only one gat. And that is a Bakrat.
Great to have Bakrat on board, and hopefully they'll be along for the rest of the journey. Got to have somewhere comfy to sit while the rest of these guys are out there having fun racing cross country. They were out there, the girls and the whole support crew from Bakrat were all over the place on the track, putting on the show and making sure all the safety was adhered to as well. Great to have you guys along for the ride. Back in the pits, we're starting to get a little bit more serious as everyone got the revs up and the blood pumping. Good to go. Just over 100 Ks times 2. Thumbs up, making sure that hydration was good to go for the cars, drivers and navigators alike. And the championship was starting to get nice and tight. For the first time ever, it would be Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard opening up the track, but unfortunately they had to take second wheel with our invitational class going up front. Not a bad thing though, because of course it is not an advantage, certainly not in most of cross-country racing, to be the first wheel out. So Keith McNetty and Toad Bareng essentially using this as glorified training, but the fastest qualifier, Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard, had put themselves in an incredible position to chase down their first big win of the season. They'd be pushed hard when you looked at the time count coming in after the time trial prologue. The CRTs of Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard, along with the second of the CRTs, would be looking for Tony and Mikey Gavea to chase them down and chase them down hard. The track layout, again, for just over 100 Ks times 2, was going to be extremely tight and testing. The early part was wide open, and Yanni and Chris Visser Jr. would be making hay while the sun was shining. They've got an extremely strong car underneath them, and they would just be plowing straight into the dust. Tony and Mike Gavea in the class special Ps, meaning that there is no windscreen at all. So going into dust was going to be more than a challenge for these guys. And you can see at the early part of winter, the dust was bright red, dry as a bone, and just hanging in the air. We do say in cross-country racing, a little bit of breeze is an absolute godsend. But when there's no wind, that means there is no vision. Keith and Victor de Tooy would have a good run in the early stages as well. And we're possibly going to be able to close down on the cars ahead of them. Stijn Villiers and Peter van der Merwe in the diesel-powered Ford Ranger 3.2-litre 5-cylinder turbo diesel were hopping and popping and trying to find those legs. The diesel engine didn't like the sprint format of the 36-kilometer prologue. Hopefully, it'll warm itself up nicely and enjoy the slightly bigger, just over 100k loops. No issues on the D67 coming out of the time trial, apart from the fact that it went into limp mode. Lost around about 20 seconds, so hopefully the Ford came right when it came into racing. Jaco and Johan Vierse, also a crew that reported no real problems coming out of the prologue time trial, apart from a time that they would have hoped to run a little bit faster. They'd be chasing themselves and trying to get themselves back up into a higher position come the end of lap number 1. Often with cross-country racing, you will see a couple of drivers or crews that had their problems in the prologue start to really make mincemeat of the slightly slower cars ahead of them. And in cross-country racing, it is so much of an advantage to be a little bit further back, allow the other cars to open up the track. This format of racing, by the way, sets them off on true times. So, for example, if Andre Gildenhuys and Victor Fincham set off or finished the prologue just 3 seconds behind the car in front, then for the racing, that's how they start. Small explanation there, because a lot of the other categories and series that race around the country do run a 2-minute dust gap, but this time out, that means the racing is straight out of the gate. Running some balloons there as well. Cook and Skidder will go out and do the chase down, and Francois van der Walt and Gerry Prinsloo, hopefully with their braking issues resolved, will go out and push. That's going to be a crew we will really keep an eye on, because the D67, coming off 2 back-to-back wins so far this season, does not want to lose that average. Regan Ostrom and Warren Foss, also remember their car went into limp mode, so they are going to have to work extremely hard to get themselves back up from almost the very back of the pack. On board with Dutoy and Gossard in the CRT. And this is what you always see when you see a motorbike racer come across into cars. Totally different line choices and aggressive racing from the get-go. We love having this crew as part of the cross-country racing family joining us on the 2018 Regional Championship Racing Tour. Only thing you can say is when a motorbike racer gets into a car, possibly a little bit too aggressive, but sometimes it pays off. Yanni Visser and Chris Visser Jr., this pairing have probably more experience in cross-country racing than any other crew out there, and they're going to be a massive threat going forward. Remember, they've got one hand on the trophy as we near the halfway marker of the season as far as the big championship goes. Keith Dutoy tippy-toes his way through that as Tony and Mike Gouveia in the CRT close things down on them. Looks like this track is going to really be close racing the whole way through the day. CRT just looked like it might have had a tip over if it had attacked from that angle, so decided to go to the wide line through the tunnel. The Huttings don't seem to be running in limp mode at the moment. This will be a crew we'll keep an eye on in the D67 to see if they can climb the ladder. Jacco and Johan Visser also no real issues in the D15. They will have an issue though as they catch the cars a little bit further up the road and start getting into the dust. The good thing about the layout of the track is, around about the quarter marker here, as you see the D1 of Van Veek and Marais dropping in. The good thing about a section like this is it's a bit of a leveler. No one can really make up or lose too much time in these zones. And we were lucky enough to be hosted, like I say, by the Lichtenburg 4x4 Club. So the tracks are well run in, but certainly not tracks that you can attack too hard. Tell that to Francois van der Walt and Ferry Prinsloo, though. They definitely needed to make up as much time as they could and make as many passes as they could in the early running. Cookie was going along for the ride as well, and around about 20 seconds off his back wheel was the E6 of Andre Gildenays and Victor Fincham, trying to maintain the vehicle. So many crews say it is lap number 1 where the big mistakes come. Rather just ease your way through. Take a small loss of time on lap number 1, learn the track, and on lap 2 drop the hammer. Tunes Dutoy and Anna Nokia, they'd stayed well out of trouble on the prologue and were also modestly going about their business on lap number 1. Just over 100 Ks to go. Regan Austin and Warren Foss, even though they had their problems on the prologue, it was race day and they needed the championship points. There was a problem though early on for the X777, a broken prop shaft, and looked like the end of the day.
The big nut on the differential got loose, so when we took the cross axles, the whole prop shaft get out. So we managed to take it out apart, but the thread got so badly hurt, so we couldn't put it together.
The tow out, and unfortunately end of the day for the big diesel. Hopefully the rest keep running. Join us after the break as we continue our coverage from Lichtenburg.
Coming up, from the Arctic to the tropics, Ford's Test Center has it all. In the lap of luxury, the Lexus LS. And the new VW Touareg.
This is useless space.
You're useless space.
That wasn't nice.
Has the love affair with your home hit a roadblock?
We have 4 girls in 1 bedroom.
This house is not going to work with 2 dogs and a new baby.
Should you start seeing other houses?
We don't need to buy a new house just because we're going to plan on having a family.
People do that all the time.
David's shown us something that has everything we want.
Bedroom number 1. Good sized bedroom.
Wow.
But we are getting a Hillary. I'm going to make this house work for you. And when I'm done, you're going to love it.
Oh, I'm certain you can do that.
Will you love your home again?
Oh, wow.
Everything can be fixed.
Or will you list it?
All right, so decision made? Decision made.
rev up those engines because Petrolheads is back for a whole new season. Get ready for smoking tires, fast rides, sweet rides, and some pretty questionable rides. And not forgetting some of the coolest motoring events across Mzansi. That's Petrolheads, the show all about petrolheads for petrolheads by petrolheads, only on DSTV channel 189.
Welcome back to Mud, Dust and Gears as we continue our race coverage from round number 3 of the Northern Region Cross Country Championship Race Series for 2018, the Lichtenburg 250. Now the early part of the race lap concentrated near base camp, which was hosted by the Lichtenburg 4x4 Club, meaning that the pace was relatively slow. But out onto the second half of the loop, it was flat out wide open, so the more horsepower you had and the more bravery you had meant you were going to be a race winner. Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard had got themselves into a race lead, making the pass on Macanetti and having clear air out front. From now on, this was going to be the crew to chase down. Behind them, there was going to be a hard charging Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. They were in the zone and knew exactly what they had to do in the cross one. Just up the road there, you could see the dust that they were chasing down. Keith Macanetti and Toad Bareng. A problem on the vehicle, on the bat. They'd lost their silencer. And when you are in an open vehicle like this, and you're reliant on communication between navigator and driver, you lose your silencer, it is absolutely deafening. So they had real communication problems, meaning that it was hand signals all the way and loss of time. They dropped out of the race lead. Jaco and Johan Visser just slowly but surely climbing the ladder and doing the great waiting man's game to get themselves into a solid position. They were inside of a top 5, getting chased down by Diedrich and Rickes Hutting. The car wasn't sounding great, not firing on all cylinders. But this car was, though. Keith and Victor de Tooy charging hard in the White Star bat. If they had any goal on the day, they would want to make the pass on Macanetti. Ignace Duplessis and Jean Vermaak, they'd had an interesting day. A relatively easy 30-kilometer loop, but on lap number 1, they picked up some major issues. A broken rear shock and started to develop some overheating issues late on in the lap. The KB300 was battling in the wide open area of Lichtenburg. Similar situation befell Tony and Mike Gavea. They were having to slow their pace, also with an intermittent overheating problem. Cookie and Skitter plowing on, and then Gildenace and Fincham played the team game here as they dragged out the E1 stranded vehicle of Theuns de Tooy and Arnold Norkier, who had unfortunately dropped off into a hole and just could not find the traction to get out. Great sportsmanship coming into play from Andre and Victor to get their buddies out of the hole and going again. By that stage, though, it was all go, go, go from behind as the D33 of Francois van der Walt and Gerry Prinsloo made hay while the sun shone. 2 easy passes made up, and they were absolutely flying in the D33, trying to chase down their 3rd win of the season. Keith Macanetti and Toad Bareng deafening the locals as they dropped the hammer on the big V8 powered machine. Race the train, always an incredible spectacle, especially out in the Northwest Province area that is linked up by a lot of the train tracks, and we so often cross or race alongside them. Ronnie Cook and Jaco Skidder getting chased down by Diedrich and Rickes Hutting, having an air horn off with the train. And that driver will remember this day for a long time. The day he beat a couple of buckies. Cookie will be giggling under his helmet there in the cab. He's such a happy soul. He does like his off-road and cross-country racing. And that's a story he'll be telling later on in the bar. He'll say, "Huddy, I beat the train, buddy." Keith and Victor de Tooy, no problems on the sideline here. And an ungroomed part of the circuit, meaning that you can't really drop the hammer the whole way down here. You've got a tippy toe. And because of it being very much overgrown brush, you don't want to be smashing any rocks. So the Toys just decided to err on the side of caution this time around. They are very much capable of going a lot faster than that. But in that high grass, Oh, that's where mistakes really come thick and fast. Tippy-toeing their way through, Ignis du Plessis and Jean Vermaak, already having injured the car, limping with a broken shock and not wanting to do any more damage. They would eventually also pick up an overheating problem due to having to nurse the car along, and would desperately try and make their way into pits to get the running repairs done on the KB300. And more retirements out on the track. Andre Gildenhuis and Victor Fincham. They'd gone through a water splash and hit a hidden rock, and this had unfortunately ripped the exhaust apart and ruptured their fuel tank. They were out of the race. No issues for Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. though. They were charging on, and if anything, getting even faster in the Cross 1. The single cab Bucky was on fire at the moment. Still running second wheel with an incredible drive still coming out of Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard, who just couldn't be caught in their CRT. Keith Magnetti and Toad Bereng causing a lot of damage to their car. Tell you what, when you run one of those pipes without a silencer, it is going to hurt the vehicle in some way. Jaco and Johan Veerse, they played an incredible strategic game at this event, easing their way into the prologue, easing their way into lap number 1. And by lap number 2, they were putting themselves onto the trophy marker. They just had to bring it home. Around about 50 k's remaining on the loop. Rodney Cook and Jaco Skitter had a good run also in their Nissan Hardbody. Unfortunately, would be ruining the day because they just didn't have a good run in the prologue that eventually held them back on lap number 1. Lap 2, they caught their stride. The Huttings still really battling with a car that just wasn't making the power that they needed, and they were falling back. Ignis du Plessis and Joan Vermaak, even though they had near-on terminal overheating problems and a broken rear shock. You can see on the front left there the damage. That front left is just skipping around there. No damping characteristics, which meaning they just cannot drop the hammer like they want to. But they're still in the race, and they're still in the championship. Tony and Mikey Gouveia would have hoped for a slightly better run on lap number 2 than they had on lap number 1. And the second of the CRTs, the P51, were charging, trying to make up lost ground. A lost cooling fan, though, was not making life easy, and it looked like they were going to climb the ladder as high as they could with an ailing CRT machine. We went back on board for a little while here with Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard, who continued to lead the race in the CRT, setting themselves up with an incredible run through the prologue. The P17 was getting the job done, but was starting to really get closed down now by Visser. Visser had the bit between his teeth, and it was clear that there was a problem on the CRT machine. He was controlling a nice solid 3-minute advantage the whole way through lap number 1, and then that advantage got brought down to near on 0, with Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. doing a sterling job to chase the carrot out front. Keith McInerney and Toad Bereng, they opened up the track in the prologue. They opened up the track on lap 1 of racing. They were still in 3rd place overall on the road. The D15, and looked like it was going to be a category win for the D15 of Jaco and Johan Veerse, who had just stayed out of trouble. The hidden story that no one tells you about in cross-country racing. Just stay away from anything that can break the car. Bring it home. Diedrich and Rickers Hutting did an incredible job when you think that for the last 17 kilometers of the race, they had 0 power steering. Believe me, that takes its toll on driver, navigator, and car, especially in the technical sections. For now, they were living on. Keith and Victor de Tooy were going to set themselves up for a podium placing in the cross category. The Cross 18, Bat Spec 3. We're hoping to climb a little bit higher, and by this stage of the race would have hoped to have made the pass on McNetty and Bereng, but it wasn't to be. Ignis du Plessis and Jean Vermaak, incredibly enough, were still running second in category, and were just moments away from bringing the KB home for its highest finish of the season. The E18 had played the game, even though they were nursing, as so many cars were at Lichtenburg, overheating issues. The drone shots giving us a good look and feel. Relatively flat area around Lichtenburg, but there were no mistakes to be given and no quarter asked. If you hit one of the square-edged rocks that are in this area, you were done. That's why so many cars were getting rattled to pieces and losing suspension or heating. Tony and Mike Gavea in the CRT, they picked up an early overheating problem with a broken fan. They were unable to get it fixed, meaning they were running on air cooling. And these cars, that means if they are in the slow running and the revs are high, do not like it. They would be tense and sweating it to make sure the P51 could come home and survive and therefore carry on leading their championship. The E14 of Rodney Cook and Jaco Skedder probably going to climb as high as they possibly could. They were on for a top 3 in their category as all crews now headed into the last couple of kilometers. Join us after the break as we see who walked away as victors and champions at Lichtenburg.
This is Car versus America. Be advised.
Please slow down.
We're not even doing the speed limit.
We drive cars.
What are you doing?
Yeah! All of the cars.
Oh my God!
People say that car culture is dead. They have no idea what they're talking about.
It's insane!
Go. So we're leaving our safe spaces in Brooklyn.
My hipster pants are too tight.
And traveling across the country to prove them wrong.
If you crash it, you own it.
This is Car versus America, and I am not a cop.
Powered by Jalopnik.
And that's where we are, and nice to see some aerial shots of Lichtenburg as we close in on the last couple of kilometers. The last Ks was a huge story. The CRT of early and almost full-time race leader Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard had gearbox problems, and that forced them to the side of the track as they were eyeing up their first race victory of the season. That meant it was the one and only Jannie and Chris Visser Jr. that led on the road and would be the first crew to see the checkered flag once again. They have it dialed in. When it comes to cross-country racing, they just know how to get the job done. The other stories to watch out for, we saw that de Tooys had their issues. The tyre had come off the rim and they'd had to lose a lot of time, but they were still going to be able to bring it home. So the Vissers were home. Jaco and Johan Visser, incredibly enough, second on the road and first in the Ds, and Rodney Cook and Jaco Skedder, after their terrible start to the day, brought it home third wheel and the win in Category E. That is a solid drive coming out of the HUD Speed Nissan Racing Squad. Diederik and Rickers Hutting, even though their car wasn't firing on all cylinders, they brought it home second in category, and Ignis Duplessis and Johan Vermaak came home with Tony and Mike Gavea on their wheel. Both of those cars having to really just survive the second loop with almost terminal overheating problems, and somehow they managed to survive and bring it home. Keith McInerney and Tote Bareng, after losing their silencer early on and being the car that opened up the track, would do a good enough job to win out the invitational category and finish just inside the top 5 overall. Nice drive, but you got to know the big end of that engine will have hurt with the loss of that silencer. Keith and Victor de Tooy having a late event puncher, and unfortunately they were on a little bit of low ground that really hindered their change of the tyre. They worked well together as a team and father and son to make sure the wheels got back onto the big bat, and they charged their way home. They would go on to take second in category, and only the second time they'd been in the car together, so good job to Keith and Victor. Regan Austin and Warren Foss brought home the Kaya Sands Midas Toyota, as they so always do. Podium places for the Category Ds. after a tough day in the seat, starting way back and having to make more passes than anyone else out there on the loop. This will be a drive that they'll remember, and a drive that could potentially net them another championship. Lawrence Van Wyk and Suisse Moret, they stayed as best as they could out of trouble. They would also be bringing home solid points in the Class Ds. After the race, we went down to the pits, and it was all smiles for the drivers and crews that finished the event. They'd load up, do a strip down, rebuild, and get ready for the next event. A breakdown and confirmation of all the results then. In Production Class D, Jaco and Johan Weerse charged their way through to a nice win ahead of Diedrich and Rickus Hutting, with Regan Austin and Warren Voss just doing enough to squeak their way into a podium position and tag a third place. In the Class E's, Rodney Cook and Jaco Skidder did an incredible drive in the Nissan Hardbody to beat out Ignas du Plessis and Johan Vermaak, as well as Andre Gildenhuys and Victor Fincham, unfortunately the first of the DNFs in Class E. In Production Class Overalls, it was the D's and E's mixing it up, with Jaco and Johan Weerse ahead of Rodney Cook and Jaco Skidder, and Diedrich and Rickus Hutting, making it 2 D's and 1 E, an E sandwich. In the Special Vehicle Class P's, Tony and Mikey Gavea keep their noses clean. They bring the CRT home with another win ahead of Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard, but it could have been such a different story had those gearbox problems not come into play. In the Club Class X, the Cross Challenge, it was Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. that took their win ahead of Keith and Victor de Tooy, and Stijn Vivier and Peter van der Merwe, unfortunately DNFing the Diesel Ford. Our one and only invitational characters, that was Keith McAnetty and Toot Bereng, but they did score enough to get a top 5 placing overall and bring home the P22. Regional overall went like this: Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. beating out Jaco and Johan Weerse, Rodney Cook and Jaco Skidder, Diedrich and Rickus Hutting, and Ignas du Plessis and Johan Vermaak get their top 5 regional placing overall. We went down in the pits to catch up with a couple of reactions post-race.
The race was very interesting today. We had very good pace, small issues. Initially we had no GPS, and then we lost the silencer, and I could hardly hear my navigator. So we're having a few overshoots, and we finally overshot and beached it on a railway line, and it took ages to get ourselves over there.
I've been here for many times. I've been here, but not racing.
How was the route marks?
Oh, perfect, very perfect. I was so impressed with the way the markings were done, especially because my GPS was not working.
Our first and second loop didn't go as planned. First loop went very well. We came in, the bakkie got a bit hot. We fixed a few things. Second loop broke the rear shock. It broke our back brake line, so we didn't have any brakes in the second loop. But I think we finished second in our class, which is not too bad. Yet again, a big thanks to all our sponsors. Dupsa was our main sponsor, RK Motion for the mapping, and of course TNT Diesel for all our fuel and lubricants.
So down to the small banner of prize giving, and thanks to Bachat, Dupes Civils, Calcimite and Zalco Motors in Uppington. The trophies were handed out and collected by all the crews that stayed in it. A modest 16-car lineup, and at this round 6 DNFs. Pretty much all the cars that came home were going to be able to walk away with trophies. McAnetty and the Toot Bereng. And a big thanks once again to those guys from all of the crews for opening up the track. The de Tooys becoming a racing family. The Vissers are a well-established racing family. And the rest are just trying to figure out how to get even faster out there on the track. Cookie and Skidder, a name we know well, and they're going to be a crew to watch out for as they become massive threats going forward. But spare a thought as we just enjoy these shots through prize giving for Willem de Tooy and Bertus Gossard, who for most of the race looked like they were going to be able to walk away as champions. But that is cross-country racing, and you've got to bring it to the line for it to count. The crews that did manage to get the job done were awarded with trophies and a stack of championship points going forward into round number 4. We sign off here at the Lichtenburg 4x4 Club and say a big thank you for hosting us, as well as Bakhat, Deep Civils, Calcimite and Zalco Motors for bringing you all of this round number 3 Northern Region Championship cross-country racing action.